Now I have it on, right? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm just sneaking on here live. Oh, hang on. All right. So, hey, folks, Jeff Salzman here. Welcome to the Daily Evolver Live on Integral Life. I appreciate you tuning in live, and I appreciate Integral Life for facilitating this and encourage you to join Integral Life if you haven't. You can find all my stuff at dailyevolver.com. And today is the 29th of April. And I'm going to share a conversation that I had on Monday, actually, so 2 days ago, with Diane Hamilton, my colleague and dear friend. She and I have been doing integral stuff forever together. And she just wrote a new book, which you'll hear about, Compassionate Conversations. And it's about metabolizing evolution, moving into the next stage of human development, of human history, and doing it in second person, which is interesting. And a lot of people focused on that. It's a fertile field, and Di's just among the best. So I will just get to that now. And I really enjoyed our conversation about conversation, and I hope you do too. All right, thanks for tuning in. Screen share, desktop 2, share computer sound, and optimize the screen and share. So there it is. And here I am with Diane Muschel Hamilton. Enjoy.
How are you? Are things?
I'm good.
Except that we're in a pandemic. Do you finish every sentence with that?
Yeah. And try to finish every thought so that I don't just show up as a spoiled brat who's actually in many ways likes the world this way.
I know. Those of us. I told you I'm starting a movement, contemplative of the world unite.
Yeah.
Except we never do because we don't want a movement.
We don't want to unite.
No, we don't. We're just working with this existence as it is.
Yes.
Thank you,
indeed.
everyone. Well, the introvert and the extrovert, actually, there's a really deeply introverted part, and there's a part of me that wants to engage. I don't want to be completely isolated. I want to actually be engaged in the world. But what is that special mix? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, intentionally seeking to integrate it is the practice that we're, I think, doing here in general.
Yeah.
And
integral, that word of ours, huh?
Yeah. And you and I are integral practitioners. We're both integral teachers. So
yes.
You're a Zen teacher too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're both students of Ken Wilber. Mm-hmm. And you and I have done so much together. I was thinking we've worked together now for 15 years.
Has it been that?
2004.
Yeah, 15 years. So that's significant.
Yeah, so 15 years we've done how many seminars and calls and events and whatever.
Yeah.
And in every case, I was just thinking about this apropos what we're talking about today, which is your new book, Compassionate Conversations. Which
Thank you. That's right.
We'll get to in a minute.
Just do a little flash of that.
Yeah, there it is. Compassionate Conversations, subhead.
How to speak and listen from the heart.
How to speak and listen from the heart.
About things that are hard for you.
Yeah.
That's the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that when I think of the events we did, the special sauce that you brought versus me, and Terry and everybody else too.
Right.
But I'd get up and I would talk and lead conversations about the politics and the culture and all of that good stuff, and more in third person. And then you'd get up and uncork the bottles.
Yeah.
And
I'd uncork some of those bottles.
50 bottles at once. Those of you who are for abortion on this side of the room, those of you, Jesus, I mean, I was frightened half the time.
I know, me too.
There you'd be, and you would get everybody all worked up.
Yeah.
And then you would lead us to a resolution that would be just the flavor of liberation itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the integration of so much of what was in the room already, but corked in the bottle,
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I think of this book, I think of you're basically doing that in the process of moving the culture along in this second person, in the we space,
Yeah.
and doing it through having better conversations with other people.
Yeah, and some of the reasons that we can do that are actually kind of, I would say there's some really, really key elements of the integral map that are essential. And I think the first one is the conversation as literally just a phenomena in each moment of evolution, of development, of people's learning, so that we're not approaching it necessarily filled with fixed truths, but we're approaching it more in the spirit of inquiry, in which we know that what we're thinking right now could potentially be informed by something someone else says or thinks or has experienced that we haven't. There's a kind of an openness within the integral framework that, because we have an evolutionary lens, that is super helpful.
Yeah, we know that we're in an evolving system.
Exactly.
And so why would we want to contract around even our own ideology? Because
Precisely.
we know that the idea here is to grow it. And we grow it by listening to other people and making this really important shift that, I feel like I just learned about here in my 60s, but to go into—
I know, we learn it over and over, don't we?
I know, but to go into a conversation not with the idea of influencing, although that can be there, but of the idea of being influenced by.
Yeah, I think what we can also say is that when we use a developmental model, that whereas asserting truths is a developmental hallmark that we see in young children and we see in young adults, and they're trying to get certain about things, but as we grow and change, we're open to other perspectives. We start to take a perspective on our own perspective, which is quite amazing in itself. And then we're able to start seeking perspectives because we're more at home in this kind of, Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, the bad news is that we're in a free fall, and the good news is there's no bottom.
Right.
And so getting kind of used to that sensation that, we don't have to cling to a particular truth or perspective in order to feel secure, but we can actually kind of let the bottom drop out a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are another it's a developmental thing to really be able to do that.
Yeah. And when you do, you can have a flavor of that liberation at the end of that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you wrote this book. It's now coming out. It's available now, I'm assuming.
Well, actually, to be honest, because of the pandemic, the electronic version will be released in 1 month from now, May 22nd. Right now, it's pre-order on Amazon, or you can go to the Shambhala website. And then, but because of the way things are shipping in warehouses and storage right now, the hard copy won't be released till July.
Oh, okay.
So if people want that hard copy, they're going to have to wait for a few months until the toilet paper is hopefully moved out. And there's
we have our
rubber.
priorities, Diane.
Yeah, Amazon literally has reprioritized what's being shipped.
Yeah.
And books have moved down on the list. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you came to write this book, your collaborators who are very interesting.
Yep.
And, maybe just a basic frame for how you're presenting this compassionate conversation.
Well, again, I think for you and me and your listeners, if we think about the conversations that we're in right this moment, we're in conversations that are quite different than they were 3-4 months ago, in the sense that, we're thinking about health and wellness, and we're thinking about vulnerability and protection, and we're also thinking about the economy and, trying to balance values of health and well-being with values of letting, people earning a living, right? So it's a very profound conversation. Well, at the time that Shambhala approached me about writing this book, many of us were engaged in conversations around racial justice, around, equity and questions of diversity and gender relations and non-conforming gender and issues related to, just all of the kind of difficult conversations that kind of correlate a lot of times to identity and that demand certain kinds of awareness and maybe an ear that's tuned to some degree to political correctness, and then that starts to feel really oppressive. But people are engaged in these conversations. And so Shambhala approached me and asked me if I would be willing to write a book related to these more challenging conversations that people were having. And I think at first there was sort of the sense that I could maybe talk about how to maybe possibly combat racism, or possibly how we could understand our perspectives more related to gender, or these other kinds of things. But basically what I said is, what I can do is I can offer a skill set that people can use in any conversation that's difficult. And so it isn't a book about those topics, but it's a book that will help you deal with more difficult conversations, whether it's politics or religion or whatever it happens to be. This is a book that has a lot of skills and perspectives that hopefully will help with that. But I did engage Gabe Wilson and Kimberly Lowe, my co-authors. Gabe he's biracial. His father's African American. His mother is Brazilian. She's from Rio. She's white. His father's from St. Louis. Obviously, he's Black. And Kim, interestingly enough, she's a citizen of the UK, but she's of Chinese descent. And her home life her Asian identity, she grew up spent a lot of time in Singapore. Her mother's relatives are in Singapore, and she spent time in China later, but she's Chinese fundamentally. And I thought it would be really good to have both younger perspectives, because these things are changing and they're both in their 30s, and then perspectives that take, different ethnicities, different race, different cultural perspectives. I felt like we'd bring more to the table as a threesome than we would with just me and my little point of view over here in the Rocky Mountains. Right. So that's how I engaged them.
Well, and you three worked together, right? And
yeah.
Did, you in the Lion's Den, if I may say.
Yes.
You went into doing diversity training, and again, with your own style of bringing things to a painful point first.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's very important to me to, and I did quite a lot of diversity training and quite a lot of what back in the day we called cultural competency and race relations when I was in my 30s and 40s. And then while I was working with you at Integral Institute, I kind of stopped doing all that work. And then as I integrated Integral into my facilitation work, of course, these topics came back up and there was a need or an interest in doing that. And so Gabe and I framed a training called Freedom and Fairness, in which we attempted to start to have these more difficult conversations and really be real with one another about what we experience around our identity and our different views of what's true around all this. And and then basically really inviting people to be real is how do you invite authenticity that results in greater awareness and compassion, as opposed to everybody drawing a line in the sand. So that's really what we've been doing.
Yeah. And how has what have you learned there? And how have you seen that changed?
One thing that I've seen change is I've seen far more people in positions of power who may have we might call it, for lack of a better word, a more privileged or majority perspective, be interested. So that's a big change. I mean, when I was working for the court system and we were doing this kind of work, it was a little bit of insisting that court employees actually think about these topics, because the court, of course, is it is the forum in culture where people come to be treated fairly. And yet one of the things that we've discovered is, even with legislation for equality, that all the hidden biases actually are still at work. And so unless we do both external work, legislation and policy work, and we also do internal work and help people become aware of their biases and look more deeply into how our biases are hidden and outside of our awareness, that we actually still enact much of that. I mean, I was listening this morning, a program in which I think it was just on the radio on NPR or something, around the difference for you and I to put on a mask than a Black man, and whether the Black man has status and culture as a physician or as actually somebody who's working class or possibly even homeless. It is not the same experience. It just isn't. They're treated extremely differently, and they have to cope with that. And it's helpful for us to understand that they're not having the same experience we are.
Yeah.
And so back to my point, what I've seen change is far, far greater interest. In other words, people are really growing in their interest around this than when I first began. So that's an upside. I'd say one of the downsides that I've seen is people need to learn that we can take strong stances. We can be self-righteously angry. We can be advocates without necessarily closing off to one another. And I think I've seen like this whole cancel culture, like you make one error now and people cancel you, you know, you wear the wrong clothing, or somebody accuses you of cultural appropriation. And these are lots of the effects of the internet. And you break one of these rules around political correctness or whatever, and you're just canceled and cast out. And to me, that is extreme. I don't quite understand how that got into the culture, except that it seems really black and white.
Yeah.
Us and them kind of quality. So I've seen it get more extreme in some ways.
In a way, it seems like if you think of evolution as being the process of differentiation and integration, that's just the engine of evolution. Mm-hmm. It's sort of the downside of differentiation.
I guess it is, where it just becomes, I
mean, it's like the upside of this is that, as you say, more and more people are interested in it. Yes. I mean, there's actually a move into green.
Yes,
in the sense that powerful people who, were privileged and blind want to get into this, that there's a pull into this. And this is a beautiful,
they understand that it's not changing as much as it needs to. And exactly. Absolutely. Yep.
And so then what we're uncovering then as we do this is that, we did the integration thing with the Civil Rights Act, and the laws are changed in the exteriors.
Exactly, the right-hand quadrants. We did work in the right-hand quadrants, and now we're having to do it on the left.
Exactly. Yep. And so once we, surface that, then we see that there's a whole new can of worms.
Absolutely.
And it's not pretty.
No, it's difficult.
There's overreactions, and there's, counter reactions, and we get more polarized, actually, because that polarization is another way of talking about differentiation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we move into the integration, which is, I think, what you're doing with this book.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to actually create enough latitude and at the same time, some depth and some real heartfulness. And so that people can actually, that you and I could talk about gender, or that you and I could talk about the experience of being straight and gay, and just be curious about what our respective experiences are and how are we both bound. And that is not to, that's not to create a flatland. In no way is my experience the same as someone who grows up with brown skin or black skin in the inner city and just treated really differently by, let's just say, police. These are common kinds of things. But on the other hand, can we actually understand each other? Do we have enough commonality as a human being that we can prepare sort of a groundwork for our exchange? Yeah. Even if we don't see the world the same way, there's still so much that we can join around. Yeah. So much that we have in common.
Oh, yeah, totally. And that's a practice in and of itself, is to actually look at people, and just as we, in meditation, we sort of deconstruct the conditioned mind.
Yep.
So we look at another person, and we see race, we see age, we see gender, we see all kinds of things.
Yeah, we see social status of all kinds, roles, we see family origin stuff, we see culture, we see so much.
Yeah. And as we do that practice, we see finally just you. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Look at you.
Yeah.
And look at me. Yeah. And you mentioned Trumpa. What if the poignant observations he made that's always stuck with me is, if you look at another person and really see them beyond the conditioned mind, there's only one appropriate response. And that is, oh.
You're so vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, just this poignant, oh my goodness.
All right, let's challenge ourselves.
It's not easy.
Can we do that with President Trump right now? You and I?
I can. Yeah. I actually can. I mean, I can't stably do it, but sure. I mean,
I can do it if he'll stop
psychopaths are
telling
people too.
I can do it if he'll stop telling people to drink Lysol. I
Oh,
can
I know,
I can
no.
see you with an open, compassionate heart. Just don't tell people about the disinfectant. Just
You
stop
don't
the
think that
bleach.
should be, we ought to integrate that into our new integration?
I think we got to make some distinctions here. And, in the right-hand quadrant,
Oh,
Lysol is
Lord.
not good on the interior. Let's just be
I think that definitely was a quadrant conflation there.
clean yourself out, but not literally.
But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the culture wars, if we're going to have an integration, we have to, and this is Green's, to the degree that greed is stuck in green.
Yes.
That is, it is monoperspectival, in that it thinks that its worldview of pluralism and all of the good stuff of interiority, psychology, all of it, is the only right way. Then it becomes totalitarian. And that is, that's the problem. So that Green can talk about inclusivity, but it doesn't include Trump people. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, my family.
Yeah.
What is great about pluralism is that it actually is interested in the genuine subjective experience of everyone, including anybody who's in a marginalized role. And then it proceeds to exclude anybody that doesn't have that same interest.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's practicing multiple perspectives. This is the first time that we're actually practicing being able to hold this, but it isn't, as I understand it, until people reach second tier or level of integral, they actually can do it. You can actually see the true and partial perspective, of somebody from a red state and really kind of get where they're coming from.
Yeah, and get the part of the truth that they have that you don't.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah, precisely.
Whatever, patriotism, what's good about, God and country. That needs to be part of a new integration, because this is one of the problems with, Green and progressives in general, is that they're depressed. And it's
they are.
Green is based on what they call critical theory and philosophy, which is God bless it. It comes on to critique all of the totalitarian worldviews of the past.
Well, actually, I had that experience recently, which was I was listening to Bernie Sanders, and then there was an interview with Alexandria AOC.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, on the New York Times. And I was just interested in listening to them. And I realized in listening to both of them, there isn't anything that they say that I disagree with. Where I part ways is that I never hear them say anything positive.
Yes.
I don't hear them say what's working.
Nope.
I don't hear them talk about anything positive that's actually happened. I don't hear that, well, we might be doing this well, but we need to improve here, or here are the corporations that actually are making a contribution versus the ones who aren't. It's just everything is wrong. Everything needs to change. People are being treated terribly. The corporate class is actually ruining the world. And I just can't see the world in those kind of black and white strokes.
Well,
I just can't.
Yeah, nor can about 70% of the population. About 30% maybe do.
Yeah.
And so if you like Trump, that's how you get more Trump.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that I see in progressive culture in general, even related to this COVID, is that, I think of MSNBC as the fear channel and Fox as the hope channel. They're both offering one's offering false hope, one's offering false fear. And I'm afraid there's, only so many people can buy that just sort of energetically.
Yeah, just day in and day out, just a steady diet of, look how terrible it is, and a steady diet of things are great. I mean, that's what you hear Trump do, right? There's no complexity in his, I'm great, we're great, it's all great, we're great, don't worry, I'll take care of you, ish, although he doesn't ever really say that.
Right.
But it's just this
Big
one.
Daddy. So okay. So looking through your book,
Mhm.
um,
And by the way, Ken wrote an incredible foreword.
I
And
loved it.
did you read it? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I felt so, I just thought it was so generous. I asked him just to write an endorsement, and he wrote 10 pages.
Yeah.
And basically what I felt like he did for the book was he actually created a coherent foreword that shows the integral wave throughout the book. Because
Yeah.
one of my concerns, of course, is that for some people, it's going to be too soft. And for other people, it's going to be too hard. And for
Yep.
other people, it's going to be not complex enough. And for some people, it's too complex. So there's always that, I know with this particular topic in this audience that people's reactions there's going to be a range. And it isn't going to be simply straightforward like my other two books, because I'm trying to grapple with some of these more difficult topics. So
Yeah. Well, that's kind of occupational hazard of Integral, is that because it's not totalitarian in either side.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
critiqued by both sides. It's too tough. It's not tough enough, whatever.
Yeah.
I love what Ken wrote, if I may
Yeah, please.
read a bit.
That'd be great. I love it.
Yeah. He talks about these 3 stages of development that make up the culture war: the traditionalists, the modernists, and postmodernists, progressives.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, in various forms, these are indeed the 3 most widely contested values in the culture wars.
Mm-hmm.
But what none of these values offers is an integrated or cosmocentric viewpoint, which can indeed integrate or unify all of them. That is the fundamental perspective of this book. And by adopting this bigger picture, that makes room for all of them. The authors are able to successfully facilitate the many battles between each of them. This is part of their unifying framework or bigger picture, and it does indeed make room for all. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really appreciated his framing it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're doing, if we look at the evolution moving into Integral from green postmodern, we're going to move there in first person, second person, and third person. So we're going to have a new view that includes the best of what's previous. There's also going to be a new we space.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And a we space in Integral is its own thing. It's made up of you and me, but ontologically, it actually has its own identity. Mm-hmm. It's its own thing. And so we have to actually evolve in that in that realm too. Mm-hmm. And I often wonder, what's it going to be like to have a relationship at Integral? Where we speak a deeper truth to each other, where we become ever more sensitive. This is, green continues to grow into Integral.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we laugh a lot more.
I think we laugh a lot more too. Yeah.
Yeah. And we sort of, there's maybe possibly, a little more willingness to balance our assertions with our receptivity, our willingness to surrender our perspective. There might be more humility, hopefully.
Yeah. What I love about your book is that you don't necessarily say what that is going to look like, although just like you just did, there's some things that we know are going to be true, but you sort of give us the process of dealing with it, and the sort of the practice itself of getting us there. And so what I wanted to have you talk about a little bit is difficult conversations with my spouse or a friend or family member. I have an I space. There's a you space. There's this we space. We listen. How do we approach that?
Well, let's start with the body, because I think one of my things that I've learned that I think helped a lot with being at Integral Institute is we put a lot of emphasis, naturally, I think it's happening in culture, on our somatic experience, like what's actually going on in the body and what's the relationship of body and mind. And one of the things in the work that I do as a facilitator and as a conflict resolution person is I'm always feeling a lot about what's actually happening in my nervous system and in the nervous systems of others. And there's a funny way that the nervous system is very binary. And what I mean by that is that If it's relaxed and doesn't feel threatened, if it feels good, we can listen, we can hear other perspectives, we can access multiple truths, but the minute we feel threatened, all of that becomes difficult. So we have the fight or flight response, we have the the presence of cortisol, of adrenaline. Whenever there's a threat, even if the threat is simply something like, I don't agree with what you're saying, that contraction and that kind of sense that something's wrong and bad starts to set in, and everybody starts to drink a little cocktail of stress hormones. And when that starts to happen, the whole room changes. And so we really need to understand the difference in our own body, in what it feels like when we're relaxed and open, and what can happen, and what happens as soon as we're threatened. Because in a way, for me as a facilitator, it's a little bit like acupuncture, in the sense that when a system is too tense, it has to be relaxed. You have to soothe it. And when a system is too relaxed, it has to be stimulated. So in a certain way, when you were talking at the beginning of the call about how I would, bring everybody together and then kind of pull the cork off, in a way that was to enliven the system. Like, what do we really think about this? What are our, I remember we had a conversation, which was quite a remarkable one, with some transgender members of the integral community, where we were just all really frank around something that was new to many of us in our experience, and the awkwardness and the sometimes uncomfortable quality, and kind of confessing that. And then our transgender friends just really listening and receiving, and basically kind of talking about what their experience was. And then we went back and forth, and by the end we were in that state of just kind of mutual appreciation. And sort of, I remember one person saying, I don't expect you to get it right. I haven't gotten it right. And I felt like, well, that was the thing we all joined in that moment, is that none of us felt like we could do it quite right.
Well, let's just pause there.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Sure.
that kind of an orientation when you're going to have a difficult conversation with your spouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not sure I know what is going on here or what we need to do, but I approached, here I am.
Here I am, and I'm relaxed, and here's what I'd like to share. Asking questions from that relaxed place. What do you think? What do you feel? And then when you feel the defensiveness start to set in, that's when you notice it.
Well, that's when it gets scary, and that's when it was scary with you too.
I always, right?
And I'd want to run.
Yes, because it's just literally what the body feels like. Because once that happens, once your heart starts to palpitate and you feel those sensations, everything in you wants to run. Your entire evolutionary intelligence is online then. That's not Jeff just being, scared. That's like the way human beings have survived, or through those sensations.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of be able to cope with those for a little while until, again, the system starts to relax, because difference is exciting and sameness is soothing. That's the thing. So you got to have enough sameness, enough commonality, enough, well, let's just both try and relax a little here and see if we can listen to one another's perspectives. Okay, I notice I'm getting really identified right now, and I feel very threatened about what you're saying right now. So what part of me can find some partial truth in what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah. So learning to listen to the body is really important, because we engage these conversations when we're defensive and nothing good is going on usually.
Well, in just the awareness itself of, it's like moving from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence.
Yeah.
In the sense that, I am flooded with cortisol.
Yes.
I know what this feels like.
Yeah, my hands
I know
are
what
trembling.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you might even say that.
Yeah, we say I'm triggered, but triggered still makes it seem like it's psychological. This is physiological.
Yeah, and triggered also implies that the other person pulled the trigger.
Yes, exactly.
And let's not go there yet.
No. No, and also I think then if we talk about the midbrain, so that's we have this triune brain, right? And the oldest part of the brain is simply fight, flight, craving, and relaxation. Simple, almost, as I said, just really binary. But then when you add the limbic system in there, and the mammalian brain, the middle brain, midbrain, all of the complexity of our emotions are housed there. Apparently, it has to do with human bonding. We have jealousy there, we have pride, we have all these other experiences related to who we are as primates in relationship to other, we give birth to live young, we bond, we separate. And so whenever there is a strong emotional quality in the room, because of limbic resonance, everybody feels it.
Yeah.
And so you can't just keep talking when anger is pervading the space. You've got to drop in and relate to the anger. Hey, I noticed that we're getting really pissed. Should we keep going and just get really mad at each other, or should we dial it back a little bit? Well, I don't want to do what you want to do. Quit telling me what to do. Okay, then let's just get mad. You have to include the emotions as well.
Yeah. I've never seen anybody do it like you, Di. In front of a room, it's like watching a maestro. I'll tell you. Yeah.
It's all
you have
born
such sensitivity to it.
I do. It's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm glad you sort of distill it into a book for, just regular old conversations.
But what a life's work that I have to be in the middle of awful, difficult conversations with people all the time. Ouch.
I know. I remember, I was thinking about this with this COVID thing and how we're balancing, economics versus health.
Yeah.
Those two right there.
Yeah.
And how you would do this lifeboat exercise where you'd put 12 people in a lifeboat.
We still do that. I know.
Oh my God. And they'd have to decide who they were going to throw off.
No.
They'd have to decide whether or not they were going to stay.
They made their own choice. We changed all the ground rules, and it had to do with you being fully who you are right now and being supported in your choice. And what a different experience it was but it was harrowing. I agree.
Oh, we had some wonderful times with that.
Yeah, we ended up usually in good places. Someone was asking me about that the other day and telling me they were sort of saying that it's kind of a crazy wisdom approach. And I said, I haven't had too many things go off the rails, honestly.
Yeah.
Like we always find our way through.
Yeah.
So there are moments where I feel like it's gone off the rails for sure.
Yeah. Well, and with our conversations and with our conflicts with our people in our lives as well, sometimes it does go off the rails. Yeah,
sometimes it does. Yep. Yeah. But we recover, we come back. Human beings are nothing if not resilient. And we're using the language of anti-fragility these days. And, that we don't just return to homeostasis. We're stronger because of these forays. But I do think people need to get very sensitive about their body. They do need to practice listening skills and understand how in the moment when things are tense, all you got to do if you want to calm things down is just reflectively listen. It is golden.
Really?
And yes, absolutely.
Where you, in a way, recite back what they said.
Yeah. You just basically hear, like if all of a sudden if things are getting heated, and the bodies are getting intense, the minute one person says, let me just reflect what I think I heard you say, and really means it, then all of a sudden the receptivity comes online, there's relaxation that sets in, and it's almost impossible for the other person to, there are occasional examples where people will stay excited, but usually bringing that listening in calms people down. It just does. Yeah, that's what it does. Yeah.
And that, it even gets to the cultural issue of, when we have worldviews difference, one's God and country and one's world-centric pluralism and all of that sort of thing. It's literally threatening to let the other one in.
Absolutely.
Because it negates yours.
We can only hold one truth until we become integral, and that can actually hold multiple truths.
Yeah.
People have been practicing and learning receptive listening skills now, are called active listening skills, probably for 40 years.
Right.
And I don't see people using it all that skillfully. I see some people with their formulas, but not real genuine kind of, I tell people that there's a lot in meditation and listening that are the same. So Trungpa talks about a free fall. Well, if you and I are in an argument and I see that it's getting heated, and I know my option right now is to do one of two things. I can either continue to assert, or I can set my truth aside for a moment and I can say, okay, Jeff, all right, I just want to reflect what I've heard you say. So what I heard you say just now is that it's important to you to have time to yourself. And that my continually seeking to communicate when you need downtime isn't helpful for you. If I can actually hold that truth and reflect it back to you, there's no way you can stay mad.
Right.
Not
Exactly.
possible.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it? It's just the physics of the we space.
It is. It's absolutely physical.
Yeah.
It's a
But they got to
energetic.
know that you really got it.
Yeah. And they believe me, we're so sensitive to each other. We know.
Yeah.
We know when we're being worked. We know when someone's just shining us on.
Yeah.
We know when it's actually sarcastic. Let me just take your point of view for a minute, Jeff, because that's what I always do, because you won't
so
do
you're
it.
saying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it's hard to do. I mean, I notice sometimes I can do it, but I won't.
No.
You know, I'm fighting with my mom. You know, my mom's 85, you know, and she's telling me that I need to do this or that. And I'm like, you know, I just refuse.
Yes.
So we have to become aware of our body. We have to start to attend to these moments of intensity versus moments of relaxation. We know that listening always creates more relaxation. And we know that bringing out our authenticity and our differences is always going to create excitement. So sometimes bring it out, because that's exactly what we need, is actually to get more excitement in the system. And sometimes, you know, just dial it back. Maybe difference isn't what's needed right now. It doesn't mean that we all have to remain in this complacent sort of boring status quo of never interfering with each other. That's not real.
Well, I like that, because I do think that some of us are just dispositionally, you know, we overemphasize harmony.
Yeah, for sure. I think we all, I mean, I used to teach at the U. I taught conflict resolution at the university up here, and I would I'd explore conflict styles of avoidance and accommodation and competitiveness, sort of three basic styles that, interestingly enough, correspond to the three poisons in Buddhism. So avoidance is ignorance, right? Accommodation is clinging. And then competitiveness is aggression. So you try to hold on to things, or you try to push things away. And probably 60 to 70% of the students told me that they felt too accommodating. That there's just too much emphasis really on getting along, and that they wanted to be able to bring out their differences more. But it was scary because they didn't know how, and they'd never had anybody model it successfully. They didn't want to hurt people. They didn't want to create a lot of difficulty in a relationship, but they didn't feel confident to do that. So that's part of what I tried to do, is work with them around, you know, growing our ability to tolerate our differences, because our nervous system gets excited, you know? And so we tend to flatten it out because we don't want to feel those sensations. But when you get used to those sensations, you can start to appreciate it more.
Yeah. Scott Peck used to talk about how conflict was the way we moved from pseudo community to real community.
Absolutely. And evolution, it's how evolution works. It's like the brain sends out new and different neural pathways, and then those new and different neural pathways get integrated. That's just how we evolve. So these perspectives in culture are important, but we have to learn how to inhabit them and occupy them, and not bludgeon one another with them, which is what happens a lot.
So you talk about, and this is where I, again, love what you're doing. And I think it's integral versus green in that you talk about sort of the built-in resilience of people, the, you know, the wholeheartedness.
Totally. I mean, there's so much emphasis on everyone's sensitivity now. Everyone, you know, microaggressions and people being triggered and needing safe spaces. Well, that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is we're super resilient. We're super tough. We've lived through world wars, for Christ's sakes. It's like, you know, you can say something that hurts my feelings for a minute or offends me, and I can get over it. That's actually also true, you know. So I think sometimes the emphasis on trauma these days gets, I mean, I really appreciate it. Let me be clear. I love the work that's being done with the body and recognizing trauma and recognizing how it incapacitates people to kind of return to homeostasis in a kind of a straightforward fashion. They get in body-mind loops. But I think then the sense that we're all easily traumatized, and then I start hearing language in groups where we're having a conversation and people will say that they're, you know, that something was abusive, and I'll be like, what are you talking about? Abusive. Like the language just gets so overblown. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. And this is the, you know, this is the where green overreaches. And you know, in integral, we want to take the best of green and to know that actually that's going to continue. We're going to get ever more sensitive to microaggressions. Because we want to, but we're just going to know each other better.
exactly.
And we're going to have a real integration that will continue, but and I guess it's inevitable, but green, its inability to see the worldviews of others and appreciate them there's blowback, and welcome to evolution.
Yeah.
There's blowback against the blowback.
Yeah, precisely. You always remind me of that, actually.
Yeah.
You're one of my go-to people, because I do have that tendency to feel like things are going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
And you remind me that evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty.
Yeah. Well, and it's what you say about the resilience. It's a relief, Di, to go into a conversation with somebody that I know I'm going to have a dueling worldview, and to not have to win.
Yeah. What a relief.
What a relief. I mean, I was just the other night, there's a new building going up in town, and it's a little kooky, but I love it. And my dear friend hates it. And when she said she hated it, I felt myself get all like contracted, because I was going to have this argument about, no, you shouldn't hate it, you should love it.
Yes.
And then I thought, no, I don't.
No. Or you could say, you could do it more consciously and say, hey, let's talk about why I hate it and you love it.
Absolutely.
I'm standing for loving it. Let me hear you talk about why you hate it so much.
It's not reflexive. It's like I have choice. Yeah. And this is, choice is always the key to the city.
And one of the
seeing it instead of being it.
Exactly. And then one of the things that happens when you fully inhabit these perspectives, and this is, part of the work that I do, of course, is when we fully inhabit the polarities, inevitably they flip. And she'll be talking about what she likes, and you'll be saying, I just hate that part.
I know. I mean, Chuck and I'll be watching a show, and I'm loving it. He's kind of secretly hating it. And I'm still loving it, but then he'll tell me why I hated it. And it's like, oh, you're right. I hate it too.
Right. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. But it's good. You're including more. That's all.
Yeah, because
you don't have to love it or hate it. You can see all of it.
Well, and you can let your perspective shift and change. And, it's like your identity isn't anchored to whether you love or hate a movie. It's like, things could be more fluid. That's what we're learning. As you were talking about, use that word liberation. In the beginning, it's like we're liberated from these, crude but important ways in which we just substantiate our identity and our perspectives to the extent that you can't even be with yourself. You're so dogmatic. And, that is one of the problems that I see with the whole pluralistic wave. It does so much correcting that's so great. And yet there's this fundamental experience that human life should never have proceeded in the way that it did.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? It's like, it's in Zen, we say enlightenment is mistake after mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. We
that just
fight and fail our way forward.
Fight and fail our way forward, An
integral sensibility asks us to be a little friendlier to the arena, to the fight,
absolutely.
itself, the fight itself. Yeah. All right, Di, anything else we need to know?
No, just we can all get better. We can, that's the one thing Integral teaches us, is anything we want to grow and learn, we can. So if you're interested, please purchase.
Yes. Yes. Let's plug the book again. Yes. Compassionate Conversations, now available for download on Amazon, hard copy in July, subhead.
How to speak and listen from the heart.
How to speak and listen from the heart. All right. Well, thank you, Diane Musho-Hamilton.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.